Hello.
Okay, I'm back. And we
Hey.
are live. I
Hey,
just
how's
need to
it
go and
going?
get my computer set up.
It keeps
Did the,
saying I reached my forwarding limit. So I'm trying to send the link to people.
did the live video play?
Me do video play?
Did the live video play? Or
Yeah, I'm
did we
I'm
set
live
that up?
video playing now.
Well, we're live now, so it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
This is not the best way to start a show.
It almost looks like it's not professional, doesn't it?
Oh, wait a minute.
There you go. Now it's professional. You had to straighten your tie. I'm still
Okay.
so what would it's a bug.
Oh, I'm not
What's going
prepared for this at all. But here we go. I wanted to start with the main question of um, how do we prove who God is? So
on?
I made a video, and I'm gonna have Proverbs guy posted on the channel soon
Okay.
about the fact that God exists. Like, how do we know if there is really a God or not? And I actually found that that is very simple to prove. I think I've even said it before on this channel. The the concept behind it is pretty much you can take anything that you know the origin of, right? Here's a pencil case, right? This pencil case had a designer. The name's printed right on it of who designed it. Um, Anything that I can think of that I know the origin of has a designer, and it is remotely complex. Anything that I know the origin of that I know there is no designer, it looks completely messed up. There is no complexity to it.
Right.
Um, Knowing this, you can infer that anything complicated out in the universe would most likely have a designer, and anything
Right.
that wasn't complicated wouldn't have a designer. But guess what? Atoms are complicated. So therefore,
Hmm.
anything containing atoms must have had a designer.
Yep. That makes sense.
Anyway, so I've been starting to work on my next video, and the question to this one is who is God? Now, the way I like to start my videos is go from a non-subjective point of reference. So if I start with the Bible to try to figure out who God is, well, that would be subjective. That'd be taking my Christian beliefs and throwing it into things. Well, how would a non-Christian who doesn't believe in the Bible, better yet, how would a robot compute who God is, starting with nothing? Starting with just simple science,
Right.
how would it move into the box of, you know, yes, so and so is God, definitively?
Right. Um, if I may,
And I,
Jeremiah, I've had a lot of people say, well, I believe in a higher power, but I don't believe in organized religion. I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, that sort of thing. How would you answer that? I know there's something out there, but I just don't know who it is, what it is.
well, that's what this video is trying to answer. Is well, this series of lives and the eventual video that I'm making. That's what we're trying to answer. And I got to say, right now, I don't know how to answer that question. I could take
Mm,
you through verses in the Bible and say, well, the Bible's 100% accurate because of X, Y, Z. It does not disagree with historical values. The Bible is built in such a way, the King James at least, is built in
hmm
such a way where the numbers line up just right that it had to be divinely inspired. And we can go into that later. I could go into the fact that none of the verses contradict. There's lots of claims, but if you actually look into it, there's not a single verse that contradicts. But that's not the point that I'm trying to get at today, because they'll see all this, right? And yes, they'll always have a counter argument. At least most of them will.
hmm
But my point is that I started with a point of reference. I started with my belief, and I went from there. There's a big problem with that. For example, if I said watermelons are blue, well, obviously, well, no, let me say more details. If I said watermelons are blue on the inside until you cut them open, then they turn red instantly. Okay, so you say, well, let me show you the inside of a melon. Cut it open, blue. Okay, and then it turned red instantly.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, well, all I saw was a red melon. And I'm like, that's because you cut it open. Okay, so you stealthily try to put a needle in and put in a camera. I can say, well, you opened the surface of the melon. You cut it open.
Mm-hmm.
The moment you do that, it turns red.
Yeah.
There's no way to prove me wrong, per se.
There's no way to prove or disprove that what you're saying is correct. Yeah.
So it could be logically consistent within itself, okay? And any testing I do proves my theory to be right. I say that it turns red the moment you cut it open. You cut it open, boom, red. And any way that you try to analyze the watermelon would contaminate the subject, and therefore I could say it would turn it red the moment it's contaminated. So, like, there would be no arguing that, even though there is no claim for it. Science wouldn't point to that assumption. It wouldn't say there's a high likelihood, there's a high probability of this watermelon being blue before it turns red. Science never points to that, but my theory, if you will, could be consistently logic with itself and not go against physics. So my thing is, you could say that argument for, Christianity, that Christianity does not go against itself and does not disturb physics.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to the show, Rex.
Hello. Good to see you guys.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good, thanks. How about you guys?
I'm well.
Good to hear.
And I trust that you're as well.
Yeah, what we're talking about today is trying to prove who God is. I have a different video, and I know you may not necessarily be all for this video. So by all means, be devil's advocate. But what I've seen so far, right? And I even made a little video on this, about 8 minutes long, going into the details of proving if there is or isn't a God. And I do it the same way that I'm telling him now about the kind of defining the rules. The fact that you can't have a starting point, you just have to look at what we know to be 100% true, what you can measure and observe. And using those processes, you can see a complicated design, which proves a complicated designer. Moving on from that point, we wanted to know who God is. We know he exists. Who is he? But we can't start with a reference point. We can't start with, well, the Bible says, because we don't know if the Bible's true in this example, in this study. So how would someone who does not know if the Bible's true just use science to point in that direction? To say, well, science, pure science of any kind, points towards the Bible, now we can start using the Bible. Or anything else for that matter, to play devil's advocate. Anybody have any suggestions?
I don't know. I guess I wouldn't take that approach, although I just don't find it compelling, but I know lots of people do. So
science doesn't deal in proofs. Science is a method. So you couldn't prove God with science. You couldn't disprove God with science. You can only prove that a series of events will happen if you take certain steps to allow them to happen. Nature will obey your will as long as you follow the steps precisely.
So I think Dustin's right here. So maybe for the sake of this conversation, we should either decide we're going to be using the word prove in like a normal sense, how we would use it in everyday conversation, or how science would use it, so that we aren't talking over each other.
Okay, that's fair. So to adapt my wording to his thing, I made a video proving God's existence. I don't know which way you try to use it, so feel free to correct me on this. But basically what I did is I went and looked at the science. Science says if we know the origin of the item, if we know of a complicated item, right? This is made out of cardboard. It's constructed in a very particular manner. If we know the origin of this, it tends to be a designer if it is a complicated subject. The only time that we see something that's not designed is when it's not complex, when it doesn't look organized. So if you take that same logic to that of something we don't know the origin of, you could then say, well, the origin is unknown, but this thing is complicated. A dog is complicated, way more complicated than a pencil case. So therefore, using the same logic, kind of like an if this then that, if it's complicated, then there would be a creator of some kind. And then that would be who you call God. That's basically the logic I've been using. So what would you translate that to be in vocabulary?
So what you're doing is a series of deductions. Okay, you're looking at a complex system and you're inferring from the complexity that there has to be someone with a superior intellect in order for the system to be functional, right? I mean, that's all good and well, but there's an argument that has been designed based on these concepts. It's called an argument from irreducible complexity, right? There's a number of reasons why this fails, right? But there's a couple of reasons why it's still a good argument. So it depends on from what concept you want to look at it from. Because if you're looking at irreducible complexity, that opens the door to the bottom up design quality that evolution claims that they have. But it also causes a problem on that same coin that there's no way to make a leap from like a bottom up like intelligence to a multicellular organism, because that requires forethought. So it's kind of a mixed bag if you want to go down that road.
Well, to keep it simple, I would say anything that is complex, okay, had to have some kind of starting point, okay, which in this case would be a designer. Because as I mentioned, anything that we know the origin of has a designer. That, and we make very simple things compared to what's out there. So it would make sense to conclude that anything we don't know the origin of would have a designer. That was, probably equally or more so intelligent than us. Which is where you title that being God. Anyway, I didn't want to get onto the focus of that because we have a video, I have a video that I'll have a Proverbs guy posting on this channel soon that I made, going into detail of why I believe that you can prove God just using, simple logic and science. What this video is about is taking the understanding of God to be a known fact. How do you go from that point to saying who God is? Because right now, in this understanding, the first episode, if you will, is proving God. Going from just looking at science to saying, okay, it's very likely there's a God. All of the science, all of these repetitive laws point to that of a creator, some intelligent design. So now, knowing there's an intelligent designer, you can go to the next stage, which is, who is he? Is he some alien from an evolutionary source? Is he is he the God of the Bible? Or is he possibly a God of Buddha? Or is he someone that we even know about? Is he an absent creator? How do you find that out? And how do you do it from a non-biased approach? Because if I start by looking at the Bible, well, then I've started with, my particular logic. And my logic may coincide with itself and not disobey the laws of physics, but still not be right.
Let me just say first off, I like the approach you're taking because a lot of people have to start with the conclusion, and it's kind of flat. Like, for instance, I don't know, there's a guy on YouTube I watch a lot. He's called MC Toon. He's a Christian, but he argues with flat earthers. And what they'll do is they start with the conclusion the earth is flat, and then they'll reason themselves out of any argument that it's not. And so they just sort of start with the conclusion. And I think that we all are guilty of that with lots of different things. And It's so what you're doing is essentially called the outsider's test of faith. You're looking at your own faith from an outsider's perspective and saying, okay, I strongly believe there is a God, but what makes it likely that it is the God that I actually believe in?
Thank you. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I'm doing it, one, for myself. Not that I doubt my faith, but I want to have definitive proof. So, like, I believe off of my faith, and I trust what I know to be true. But at the same time, as you said, it's just like this test to see how would it work. And then I also hope to be able to show this to others. And be like, you know what, you're coming from a position that isn't mine. You're coming from a position where you don't start with the Bible. Does this make sense to you? Anyway. So, and this is a question I've had to deal with for probably 2 weeks now. So I hope we're able to do something and not just have a bunch of dead air time. Which is, where do we start? We're sitting there. We have the knowledge of God in our minds.
Well,
He could be anything. He could be the spaghetti monster for all we know. How do we...
You have to start with a first-person perspective, right? That's the only way to do it, because all these proofs that people can easily dismiss, they're easily dismissed because they don't involve first-person perspectives. So, like, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So if you're trying to tie, like, an identity to a deity, I mean, you're going to run into several problems. And no matter how hard you try, your metal detector is not going to pick up plastic.
True, so you got to change your detection method.
Well, right, you not your detection method, you have to change your definition method, right? Because the issue here is that even if you have the right definition, nobody's going to agree with you. If you're the only man with one eye in the land of the blind, you're king, but you're only king because you see half the picture, right? All these other people have a full picture, but their picture doesn't involve your sight. You're trying to paint a red picture to a blind person. It's just not going to work.
That's a good point.
Well, I'm going to try anyways.
But you're more than welcome to try. I'm just saying that if you were going to start with anywhere, you have to start with the first person perspective, right? And usually what they refer to that is peer review. But in all honesty, you can't ever get two people to perform the same set of steps the exact same way. I mean, if you look at the results of some of these experiments that we're having as of recently, they're not agreeing with themselves anymore, right? Our so-called constants are no longer so-called constant.
So how would someone in the first person perspective go about finding God?
Well, I can only speak from my perspective, and I'll tell you what it was. I had the crap scared out of me, right? I saw things that I guess they kind of prepared me for the experiences I was going to see in the future, right? But I don't know. My experience is kind of unique, so it's kind of like being the guy with the half of an eye again. Like, I can't prove my experience to anybody. So if you were going to prove God, my suggestion is you study Elijah.
Yeah.
Hey Ryan, there's background noise on somebody's microphone. If people might be able to mute when
It's
they're
me.
not talking.
It's me.
Actually,
I
I think
still
it's
hear it.
Peter. I think it's Peter. Hi, Peter.
Hey, Peter. Are you in a public place, Peter? Are you outdoors? Peter?
Yeah.
Oh, that may be the background noise.
Yeah,
Let's
just whenever you want to
yeah,
talk, you unmute, and then whenever you are done talking, just mute yourself, and we'll be fine.
yeah, just mute and keep talking.
Okay, so look, here's another thing you can think about, right? There's a very wide consensus in the scientific field that there is so and so, or excuse me, quote unquote, a black hole. We have no firsthand experience with a black hole. The only thing we do have is the math of the objects that we can see in the way that they move in an interaction with a vector of a gravity field, right?
Yeah.
So if we could find some kind of a massive effect without an explanation, that they wouldn't run and say, oh, look, this is a God of the gaps explanation, right? I mean, you also have to worry about that argument. That would be a huge step in the right direction.
I disagree with Dustin here, but let me steal man. But what I think I heard him say is that we can't we sort of measure black holes by how they react or act on reality, even though we can't actually see them per se or interact with them in any direct sense. But we do see how they interact with the rest of the universe. So are you saying that we could sort of take this approach to God, that we could see how he interacts with the rest of the universe?
I think that if we found a phenomenon that was centered around a singularity, right, and we can extrapolate that the singularity exists, even though we haven't seen the singularity, there's no reason in my mind that the human consciousness would have problems absorbing that concept and adopting the idea of God behind it. It's the issue is, like you say, the missing evidence or the missing data, right? A lot of what we see is taken on faith. And again, like I said, my personal experience. Therefore, we're left with unexplained phenomena, which usually gets met with a God of the gaps argument.
Yeah, I think the argument comes from it's that experience is sort of the key element. So I have a deep knowledge of the Christian God and most gods, but I have no personal experience with God. So I find the arguments for God somewhat compelling and at the same time somewhat not compelling. But because I'm missing that experience and that faith part, I'm not convinced by the same evidence as someone who has that experience is convinced by.
My experience wasn't with God either, right? Like mine was from the other direction, bro. Wait until you got a demon staring you in the face with no absolute explanation.
I don't disagree.
Right.
If I were to encounter a demon, it would increase the likelihood that the God of the Bible is true because the Bible talks about demons.
Well, you wouldn't even know it's a demon because, if you're coming from this, approach of,
Oh,
I don't believe in demons, I don't believe in any of this. You just see this being that you can't
it's a demon,
explain.
dude.
Oh, you do?
Believe me when I tell you this. There's no question in your mind. There was no question in my mind. This experience was like, dude. I'm just telling you, bro. Like, there is no question in my mind.
But Dustin, I think that it's possible that a demon can masquerade as something else in order to deceive you. I think maybe in your case, it wanted you to know what it was, but they can masquerade as aliens, they can masquerade as ghosts, they can masquerade as false gods.
Is it possible that somebody could see what they think is an alien? And the demon goes ahead and says, I'm an alien. Don't be afraid of me. Don't banish me in God's name or anything. That wouldn't work anyways. I'm an alien. Is it possible that, something like that could happen?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but I think what Justin's saying is with his encounter, it was unquestionable to him. Like it's sort of like I'm looking in a room and here's this glowing red eyes, demonic voice, and I can't help but from culture and from the Bible to say, that's probably a demon.
Yeah. I'm just wondering if somebody else with a
Well,
different experience could look at a demon and misunderstand it.
oh, I'm sure. Look, dude. The only reason I knew for certain that it was a demon is because I kind of had foreknowledge of what I was walking into. My grandma kind of explained it to me a little bit. Like, I didn't know then, right? Like, it wasn't explained entirely clearly to me what was going to happen, right? But she gave me hints. And as I grew older and I reflected upon it, it started making sense. Um, so like when you're dealing with that kind of a thing, man, I mean, it kind of just eliminates all question in your mind. Like, I don't know how much of what's in the Bible um constitutes cold hard fact and is allegory. That's always been a debate. So, it, and all of my teaching from that states that there's a good portion of it that was allegory, um, because they didn't really have a lot of the cold hard facts from when the time of Jesus, so they had to fill in a little bit. But I don't know that for sure. I couldn't say that for sure, so I don't know. I will tell you this though. When you experience there's one of two things that you can use to distinguish whether or not you're dealing with an alien. Number one, are you able to look at your hands? If you're not able to look at your hands, you're not dealing with an alien. Right? And number
How's that?
two, well, because a lot of the times when you're in the presence of a demon and they want you to know that you're in the presence of a demon, you're not inside of your body.
Mm.
Right? They don't confront you like face to face. Okay? When they do that, it's usually like in the form of somebody that takes some how do I put this?
Dustin, can I interrupt for one
So
second
like
because I'm a little lost. So I'm saying you said you can see your hand. So if I can see my hands, it is or is not a demon. I've not heard this before.
it's not. If you're confronted with a demon, right, and you know that you're being confronted with a demon, it's because he wants you to know that. Now, the way that you can discern the difference, right, if there's question in your mind, okay, look at your hands. If your hands are not there, you are not in your body. Therefore, you are confronted by a demon, right? Because
Well,
the human mind has a way of differentiating between dream world and real world. When you're in a daydream, for example, sometimes you're so invested in that dream, you can't tell the difference between that dream and reality. That's the kind of state that you enter into when you're confronted by some other kind of spiritual entity.
well, so I'm saying, let's say they try to make themselves as physically able to be seen as possible, because let's say they're trying to deceive you. They don't want you
Well,
to know they're a demon.
there are apparitions, right? They do have that ability to create orbs. And then there's the ability to possess or infest your life with marked ones. Okay, these are all tools that are in the demon's toolkit.
So if you were born, let's do a hypothetical here, Dustin. Let's say you were born in the Islamic world and your grandma believed all the same things, but she told you it was a jinn and not a demon. Do you think you would still know it was a demon and not a jinn?
I wouldn't use that word, but it wouldn't make a difference. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. It's a creature that wants you to make a wish on it so that it can twist it and use your karma to execute its will.
Hmm.
So what we're getting from
Okay.
you, to go back to our main point of trying to prove who is God, is you have an eyewitness account of what you claim to be a demon, but in a non-biased outlook, could be, and I'm not trying to offend you, but could be anything from a hallucination, okay, some would say, to, any other being. As what's his name said? I don't remember whose voice attaches to whose face, but as that one guy said, how do you know it's not from a different religion? How do you know it's not a different name? How do you know it's a demon person?
Yeah, that would be
Now,
Rex.
Dude,
you know of it based off your faith.
You're splitting straws, right? It doesn't matter what name it takes. It could have been Morningstar, it could have been Damien, it could have been Fred from down the street. There's a certain feeling that you have. There's it's more than contextual, right? You're not just looking at things happening around you, you're also feeling it. Okay? Right? And believe me, it is seductive. It's not there was a level of this that was pure ecstasy. Okay, it was seductive. There's great power in true ignorance. Ignorance is absolute bliss. Okay, and when you have the ability to make money from nothing based on other people's signature, your life becomes so easy that nothing really matters anymore. I mean, we see examples of it all around us.
Sounds like you're describing an attractive Twitch streamer. You can make money from nothing.
Yeah. You think those women? Look, I'm not going to get into that. Never mind. I apologize.
I was just trying to make it a lot more lighthearted. I recognize it could have been taken to a whole weird place. So let's just forget my comment.
Yeah, you're trying to set me up there.
I was not, but it could have. Yeah, I guess I would not use Dustin's example if your goal is to convert an atheist into believing in God, because when you introduce more things, you're likely to just turn them off more from the idea. But I think it would be more convincing to someone who already believes in demons.
Yeah. So my whole point though is, from a scientific approach, you can't necessarily say, "Oh, demon." You have to prove that's a demon somehow. It could be anything. Now,
what
again,
do you
we're not
want?
trying to prove
What
the
kind of proof
existence
do you
of
want?
God. We're not trying
What
to
are
prove
you
the
asking
existence.
for? What kind of proof? What kind of proof do you want that it was a demon? What are you looking for?
That's my point. Is I don't know what we're looking for, which is why I brought you guys onto the show. Is say, hey, what are we looking for? Because the objective here is not to prove that God exists. It's to prove who God is. And so, trying to prove who God is with just proof, I'm asking you guys, what questions do we ask? How do we go about this? You said first person, pretty much based off of experiences. So we have this experience that we have, which is very personal to you. And I'm saying from just a subjective standpoint, how would someone who doubts you say, well, how do you, I mean, sure, you truly believe it's a demon, but how would you prove that? I don't know how you'd prove that. I mean, you were there, you know the details.
Well, I know how I could prove it, but I mean, you probably wouldn't like the places it would take you.
Let's briefly talk about the places.
No, look, dude, look. Let me explain something to you, okay? You're asking me to knock on a particular door and open it, and once that door is open, it doesn't necessarily shut. Okay, all right.
Uh-huh.
So I'm just trying to let you know, if that's the door you want to go into, I'm more than willing to knock on it for you, but don't hold me responsible for the consequences.
Can we talk about the contents of the door before we knock on it? Or is that not how it works?
So look, when truth is spoken about the other side takes attention to it. Okay, right? I mean, it's not like you don't already have enough attention on you. When you're closer to God, the devil gets mad about it. And then when you start learning the truth about the other side, they start taking swipes at you. And the thing is that God kind of has a habit of letting the devil do what he wants. So, I mean, just be sure that that's what you want. If you want me
So
to tell you about these things, I will. But I gotta warn you before you go down that road.
So let me ask you a question here, Dustin. So a guy like me who has no belief in demons or gods, and it seems like a demon's best play with me would be to do nothing directly in my life at all, because that would just prove to me they existed, which would, maybe lead me to God, which is something I'm sure they don't want me to do, right? So why would a demon want to mess with someone like me?
Well, you're asking the wrong person because I personally believe that that's what you were interacting with. I believe that you were seduced. That's why your deity is a female. But, that's just my personal belief. I could be completely wrong about that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Dustin on that, Rex.
No problem. I recognize from a Christian worldview that most, even other gods, I guess there could be other gods, like Baal, for instance, in the Old Testament. The Bible seems to acknowledge that he is some sort of existing being, but he isn't, no way comparative to Yahweh.
Right.
Well,
Well, now
if you
hold
want to
on
take
a
the
second
biblical
here.
approach to a demon,
Okay.
demons love to torment and cause confusion. So they would try to approach you and deceive you about who they were, which is why I personally think,
Oh,
on a different note, that aliens are possibly demons masquerading around and getting
Yeah.
people to believe that they're aliens when really they're demons. But that's a completely different topic.
Well,
the
they
devil
have
only has the power that is granted to him by God. Okay? And a lot of the times that power is based on your connection to whether your adherence is to Jesus Christ or if you indulge your flesh. Like, that's the boundary line right there.
Yeah, Scott made a good comment here. If y'all want to take note of Scott's comment, I mean, they have two ultimate goals, and he points them out here: keep people unsaved, or if they are saved, keep them quiet, keep them intimidated, keep them. For years I was afraid to. I didn't want to offend anybody. So I didn't make it obvious that I was a Christian because I would be criticized or made fun of or whatever. And I had to get over that because as Christians, we should not be afraid of being we should not be afraid of persecution. We not be afraid of criticism. Um, and I know Jeremiah, you've been criticized for being a Christian. You've had people, and it's actually something that proves that you're doing the right thing. If you're being criticized for your faith, being persecuted for your faith.
To a degree. Like, if you're using it like a club to beat somebody over the head with,
Yeah, you don't want to do
I'm
that.
starting to notice that, like, people use their faith as a weapon, and that's kind of becoming an issue.
Mm-hmm. You have to speak the truth in love. It's a two-pronged thing. You can't speak the truth in love, but if you speak the truth without love, then you're doing the wrong thing. You're not pleasing the Lord. The person, what's the saying? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You have to make it clear to the person that you're speaking to them because you love out of love.
Ryan,
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, I only yeah, actually, I have to be honest about it. 9 times out of 10, I use the truth to hurt people. Whenever I'm telling the truth to someone, it's usually because I do not care about that person.
Yeah. Well, that's
Interesting, because to me it's the opposite reason entirely. I tell people the truth because I care about them.
No, I refrain from certain things. I refrain from saying because I love people. Like, I love you, man. Like, there's certain things I refrain from saying to you. Just like I'm sure there are times, like, I see you biting your lip, bro. Jeremiah, I know I say things that set you off. I know, right? It's all fun and games, and it's all fair in love and war, my friend. So I mean, when all cards are laid on the table, we all get in under each other's skin. But in all honesty, when I tell you the truth, it is out of love, right? And I do sugarcoat it in certain ways, which is lies of omission, but I do that because I want to be able to consider that you are my friend, right? But if I told you what I really thought of you, just like if you told me what you really thought of me, I don't think we'd be talking.
I mean, I don't really have any negative thoughts towards you. I don't really know you that well.
I'm pretty much neutral to everyone in this
Buddy.
room, and I've got atheist morals. I don't have any grounding for my evil morals, and I'm neutral to everyone in this room for the most part. I like some of you, but for the most part, I'm just neutral to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, like I like Ryan. I kind of like what Rex is all about, but like I don't know enough about the other two to even say anything about. So like, sorry, Dustin, I don't have an opinion on you.
So, Dustin, do you think your base?
Hate to burst your bubble of how I feel about you, but
if you just met someone, what is your base thoughts of that person? Like I said, my base thoughts would be benefit of the doubt, neutrality. I would not like them or dislike them. I would just treat them normally. Is that your baseline when you're meeting new people?
I don't fight my baser instincts. You have 3 seconds to make a first impression. That's just the way it is. Your brain makes up that decision already. Okay, and usually you're able to change it, right? Like I guarantee there are times you have wanted to stop talking to me altogether, right? But you changed your mind. Okay, like I've put context to what I was saying. You saw the other end of the argument, and cooler heads prevailed. I appreciate that perspective. That's what strengthens a friendship. Okay, there's the other end of the equation though, where I know what buttons to hit, right? And to a certain degree, I'm good at it. And then there's the other end of the equation. There's the seductive principle of it. Like when you have the ability to tickle people in certain portions of their brain without their knowledge, you see certain results in their behavior, and there's a humor in it. It's kind of funny. So I mean,
I don't want to say this. I don't want to say this to be mean, but I'm an actual psychopath, and you sound like you're using terms that psychopaths have to train themselves not to do, to intentionally antagonize people, to manipulate people, to use people for their own ends or pleasure or amusement. I mean, these are all things that I have to work very hard not to do to people.
I'm telling you the truth. And this isn't just my nature. I mean, I'm sorry to tell you this. There's a majority of people that share this nature.
Well, yeah, the understanding and knowledge of how to manipulate the brain is something you can look up on YouTube, to be honest. All the different psychological tricks. I know of many, but...
Yeah, I could ride a bike too, Jeremiah. That doesn't mean I'm going to take on Lance Armstrong. There's ways of doing things, and then there's better ways of doing things. And the goal is always to get better.
I have the goal for you Christians to be more Christ-like.
Yeah, Dustin. I mean, like, in this realm, sure, like, I learned how to do it. I now have a lot of tools in my arsenal, but I wouldn't say I'm remotely the best, and I'm not trying to get better at it. It's over there. Sometimes I use it to help people. Like, if someone's unsure of a situation, there are things you can do to just calm their mind to help them make their own decision. And there's like things you can do to like help people in that way, and that's normally what I plan on doing. But like, I don't know what you're planning on doing with this information.
I was born, bred, educated, ingrained, and then indoctrinated into this, right? Like I didn't necessarily have a choice. So I mean, just understand. My mother was very particular about certain things. Okay, and she learned it from grandma, even though she claims to have been kicked out at a very young age. I don't know that I believe that. You can't escape the environment that you were raised in. I'm sorry, it's always going to be there. What you can do is build upon it and lay a new foundation and hope that the foundation you laid over the old foundation is strong enough to withstand the cracks. That's the only thing I can do.
Okay, I get that. Kind of like you can't say what happened to you, but you can choose what you do from here on out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't go back and fix it, right? I didn't necessarily have a choice in the matter, but I did learn my lesson, right? I'll put it that way. I don't want to be that person. I just don't, right? That doesn't mean that the skills aren't there. And believe it or not, I hate to say this. I hate to say this, but as time goes on, they get sharper. They don't get dull. It's not something that disappear like it. Yeah, it's like riding a bike. You never forget it, and the sad thing is the more times you do it, the better you get at it.
So I have a question, Rex. How do you go about proving if you're a psychopath or a
Like to,
sociopath?
like to other people, or how does like a doctor diagnose it? I don't.
Well, did you say you were diagnosed?
Oh yeah, since I was a kid.
So how does someone diagnose you, psychopath?
I don't have emotions, or I don't have positive emotions at all, and I can like slightly feel some negative emotions, but I simply cannot feel positive emotions. I lack empathy. I can empathize. Here's how I see empathy, or how I have to reason empathy. I don't. I can understand. I can see what you're feeling. I just don't care. But I have to see everyone as how I would like to be treated. If I don't treat people how I want them to treat me, then I am just going to treat them however is most convenient for me at the moment.
Yeah, because like I would think of myself in the psychopath sociopath spectrum, because like I've always had a hard time understanding emotions. I have like zero empathy. I kind of take the same approach you do when it comes to other people's emotions. I know, like, was it yesterday or the day before? Someone was talking about a lost one in their family and how they were like currently processing the emotions, and I just muted my mic and turned off the screen because I felt like I wouldn't be able to add anything to the conversation. So
So do you completely lack positive emotions? Like can you love? Can you feel happiness, joy?
um, I would say they're probably very dulled, but I'm not going to say I've never felt anything.
Okay, I mean there are low feeling sociopaths and psychopaths.
Because
Not all are completely lack emotions. So that is a
yeah, I have a
possibility.
very stable sense of being. I can get a little angered, but like it is rare you'll actually find me be angry unless I am choosing to act a certain way for a certain benefit. A lot of my expression of emotion is very tactical than actual emotion. To try to, as Ryan said, let them know how I feel about something so that they care about it. I don't actually, have the emotion behind it, but if I show them the emotion, then they will care. And that's an approach most emotional people don't take on the subject.
Right, it's just called mirroring. Right, you're just showing people
Yeah.
what you want them to see, so that they recognize either what you're trying to convey or what you would like to actually be feeling in that emotion. So if I recognize that I should be happy because everybody else is happy, then I will act happy. I'll even smile and laugh, but I'm not happy.
And I have like a general optimistic, positive outlook on everything because I think that's just the best one to have. It's just as far as like physical health goes, as far as everything else goes, like it is a general idea to be happy and sociable. So that's what I do. But like, I don't know, not to get too far in the subject, but like I've never been diagnosed, but I've looked at it and been like, I've had several people be like, you have a lot of characteristics of a sociopath. And then been like, interesting.
I've never seen that in you, Jeremiah. You don't strike
Exactly,
me.
Ryan. I haven't shown
Oh,
you.
Ryan, whatever you do, do not sleep over at Jeremiah's house, especially with any special kinds of pillows.
Well, that's why I always get a room when I visit them. And he can vouch for that. I always get a room. Well, I mean, so let's say somebody that you care about a great deal. Let's say they lose someone in their life that's very important to them and it hurts them very badly. So Jeremiah and Rex, do you not feel their pain along with them? Do you not hurt when they hurt? Because
No.
No.
I do. I mean, when I have a close friend who sometimes feels suicidal, and I hurt when he feels that way. When he expresses that to me, it hurts. It physically, like I emotionally, like I think about what would happen if he gave in to that impulse, and it makes me very sad.
You got to remember, we are able to lose someone close to us and not feel anything either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm envious as much as I can be of that. I wish that I had that experience, but it's also, I think it makes you a better person than me, like from a moral stance, and maybe even in every situation stance. Just that I would probably, if someone had self-harm thoughts, I would do everything I could to try to help them not hurt themselves. I'd help pay for therapy if I needed to. I would drive them or whatever. But I just wouldn't be sad. I wouldn't be affected by it emotionally. But I would try to help them. But I think
Grayson,
I'd be a better person if I could feel for them.
question.
Yes.
Sure.
Well, never mind. I didn't take into consideration the personal nature of the question. I'm sorry. It just popped in my head, and I was going to ask you, but then I thought about it. Never mind.
All right. Well, you can always type it in the chat, and if I don't want to answer it, I won't. But it's fine. I generally don't mind answering personal stuff. But that's why I like hiding my identity. I get to be honest online because I don't have to hide who I am about anything because no one knows who I am.
I take a very different approach. I don't care if anybody knows who I am.
If anyone knows who you are? Well, I was going to ask you this question, Jeremiah. I was going to say, if something bad were to happen to either your wife or your child, it would affect me in a very tremendous way, in a very negative way. I would be very upset by it, but would you be upset by it?
Well, I put a little bit of thought into this.
Okay.
If my wife were to kill herself,
Okay.
and it would be suicide, I would be upset with the idea that she killed herself. Be like, she died out of depression. She died because she thought it was the only option. And that's not a good way to go. But, if she dies and goes to heaven, then I would be happy for her, if anything. Because now she's in heaven. So, why would I be upset? Sure, I might miss her for a few years, but in the retrospect of all eternity, it's not much.
Yeah. I mean, I know it would devastate me because I love her very much.
It's very funny though. So I'm this person who has a hard time understanding emotions. My wife's bipolar. She goes from a 0 to 10 like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah. Scott says,
"Hey, Jeremiah, can I?"
Well,
sorry, buddy. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Do you have a manic socio-depression?
What does that mean?
All right. Are you manic? Do you have highs and lows?
Like, as far as happiness and sad?
Yeah, like do you go through spats of depression?
When I was younger, I hit a 2-week depression. It was what I would consider an absolute depression. If you could imagine it being in a depressed thing, I probably was, there. I was probably in that thought. It was 2 weeks, pretty much on the dot. I solved my solution, and I got over it that day.
Can I ask you a question?
Okay.
Do you agree with this statement?
Okay.
There's nothing
Well,
more I hate in life than boredom.
Dustin was saying something.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. I cut off Ryan. Actually, I didn't mean to. I'm good.
Can I
I
ask
was
this
just
question?
interested because. Go ahead.
Um,
Go ahead, ask your question so I can
how
hear it, and then
I wanted to ask, how did you get diagnosed by depression?
how can I diagnose depression?
Did you get it?
Was that the question? How can I diagnose depression?
Yeah.
Well, depression
There are
is
certain
like,
blood symptoms that you can use to diagnose. I just wanted
yeah,
to
I
throw
mean,
that in
like,
there.
depression's pretty obvious. Someone sits there and sad for a long time. Like, that's depression.
Okay.
Like, I can
Okay.
still diagnose when someone's happy. I can look at them and they're smiling, happy. I can look at them and they're sad. Okay, like there's certain things about a face. A computer can recognize when someone's happy and sad and angry. You can like, make a certain facial cue at them. They're like, that's your emotion. Like, and I've had people fool me by smiling at me, and I'm like, why are you happy? You know, and they're like, no, I'm angry at you. I'm so angry, I'm smiling. And I'm like, what in the world? Like,
I'm
Okay.
angry.
yeah. So, well, like one thing my wife does when she gets
So
really angry is she'll start to smile and laugh, and like
Yeah.
my brain gets so confused when she does it because I don't see normal angry people do that. That's not an angry person thing in my mind.
Okay.
there are certain signs of depression, though. Anyway, Ryan, go ahead and finish your thought.
Oh, I'm done pretty much. In fact, if I did have another thought, I think I forgot what it was. What kind of sandwich is that, Jeremiah?
A sandwich made with love. I don't know.
What? A
It tastes
sandwich?
good.
Does
My
it
wife
have
brought it in. I
ham?
don't know what it is. I just eat. She says
Can
it's
you?
turkey and bacon.
It's turkey and bacon. Okay, that sounds good.
I'll try to steer the conversation back to where we started. So I
Yeah, that's
assume
what I
when
was
you
about to say. I'm
when,
like, I feel like people are like, oh, what are you? Who are you wearing? You know, what are you eating? You know, let's talk about your brain chemistry. I want to know. You know, I
so
want to
do you
know
think
who
people
God is.
can choose what they're convinced of? Meaning you and I hear the same statement but come to different conclusions. Do you think we can choose the conclusion we come to,
Uh,
or do you think it is part of what
there are
just part of our reasoning?
there are certain faculties of the brain, okay, that when affected with viruses or if pressed on by a tumor, can affect your ability to make those kinds of decisions, right? So, when you're talking about the connection between uh, free will and the brain process, there's a filter there. So I don't know if that answers your question, Grayson, but I'm kind of trying to touch on the point. What was your question one more time?
So let me just put the question. So I often hear Christians say this, and in fact, I think Jeremiah said it earlier, that when you see you see a watch, you know there has to be a watchmaker. Well, that's true because of watches. But then he implies that he says you see the design in the universe, you know there has to be a designer. I do not find that convincing. I do not agree with that statement, but I assume everyone here does, whether or not they. Well, I think everyone here is a Christian. But my point is, do you think that I can help that I don't find that to be compelling, or do you think that I just don't, and there's nothing I can do about that?
So it's interesting that you bring up that you're a sociopath. That you or I said that right? You're not psycho. You're socio.
No, I'm a psychopath, type 2 psychopathy.
Oh, you're psycho. Okay,
Yes.
so it's interesting that you bring up the fact that you're well, not necessarily an atheist. Like so I mean, there's kind of a component to what you're telling us that's kind of vindictive towards the God you don't believe in because of the deity that's taken his place,
Well, the more I
right?
reason about it, I don't think I'm going to be using the word deity or God to describe what I believe in anymore. I think it gives a false, when it comes to the nature of ultimate reality, how reality truly is, I am no different than a materialist. I do not believe in non-material things at all. I have never encountered them, and I don't have a belief in them.
So to answer the question and then drive us back to the main question, because if there's one question to phrase what we're supposed to be talking about today, it's who is God, not like is there a God. To answer your question simply, I think if one bit of information is not suitable, you can do further research to find more information. Coming from a Christian approach, the Bible says if you seek him with all your heart, you will find him. So I would imagine, not all hope is lost simply because, the little bit of information is not, enough for you. I would say there's a line, though. For me, it was more than that one piece of information that got me saved and recognizing there's a God. I went through a lot of information. But I will say there's a line. I have a friend who is never satisfied. He will always ask you another question. He believes in God, but he does not know who God is. And no matter how many questions you fully answer, 100% accuracy, all this whatnot, you give him the most detailed, specific, best answers you can imagine out there. He will say, okay, you know what, that was satisfying for that question. He'll admit that. Next question. And so I ended up telling him, okay, write down your questions on a list, on a tangible piece of paper, because he said he only had a handful. He's like 200 questions in now. And I'm like, you're never going to be satisfied. There is no question that's going to give you that aha moment. In his mind, I would say it's a condition of the heart. He's not seeking with all of his heart, in my opinion, because he would come to a conclusion if he was. He would either say, yes, it's the God of the Bible, or no, it's not the God of the Bible, it's something else. At a certain point, you'd have to make a decision in that. You're never going to know everything.
May I interject? I'm not really interjecting. So, what is the best way that information has been conveyed throughout history from human to human?
Right now, it's fiber optic.
Well, I was going to say that throughout history, throughout the centuries, the written word has been the best way for humans to communicate information one to the other. It's through the written word, through books, scrolls, whatever. So if God exists and he created humans, would he not have come up with a way to reveal himself through written word to his creations? I believe he would, and I believe he did.
For all time, something outside of time, I could definitely see a tangible book being the right answer. If you're saying all of time, if it had to work 1,000 years ago and it had to also work today, a tangible book's probably your best bet. Fiber optics is definitely a far superior way to send people information back and forth as far as secular information goes. Because if I make a book and send it to you through the mail, it definitely would not be fiber optics. I would say you have a few assumptions with that, because if we're wanting to solve who God is, if we want to solve who God is based off of, well, God would of course want to talk to us, you're assuming God wants to talk to us. How do you know God wants to talk to us? To assume God wants to talk to us puts assumptions on who God is. I don't see anywhere in science, it points. I don't see any evidence yet that points to God would even want to hang out with us. I mean, it's reasonable to conclude maybe he would. I mean, why otherwise create us if not to hang out with us? But it's very much so a religious belief, especially like in my understanding, a biblical belief that God wants to hang out with us. And I do think that's right. I do think that's, as far as my opinion goes, I think that's right. But how do you prove that?
I think mankind asked God to stop talking to him. I really do. I think the things, imagine this. You're the father, you give birth to children, the first thing they do is disobey you. Would you have anything nice to say to them or their children? Could you think that maybe human beings heard some things that God said and didn't like it? and maybe there's a reason for a little bit of the vindictiveness from some of the humans towards God, call them atheists, maybe. Do you think maybe
Possibly.
there's a correlation there?
I found many atheists hate God. They don't just think, well, that's not scientifically true. And I'm not talking about all atheists, but I find many atheists hate God and hate the idea of God. And said, if God existed, I wouldn't want to be, Christian anyways. Even if it was the God of the Bible. And so that itself, I do think, testifies to what you're saying.
Well, why did God let my grandmother die when I prayed so earnestly that he heal her? That's a common argument, that sort of thing. There can't be a God because he allowed this to happen or that to happen.
That's one of the things God said that mankind doesn't like. The wages of sin are death. It doesn't even have to be your mother's sin. It could have been the sin of Adam. So yeah, that's one of the things that sticks out in the human psyche. It's one of the objections.
But that is a common, and I think we talked about this. Was it last night? A lot of atheists were created by the church. A lot of them were hurt by people in the church, and so they throw out the baby with the bathwater. Not only, I mean, they think, well,
they decided to follow the believers instead of following God.
Yeah.
And the believers are flawed and sin and all of it. And they end up following the believers and then saying, well, you're sinning and you're messed up, so I shouldn't follow you anymore.
Yeah, you shouldn't be following the person anyway. A preacher, for instance, may be preaching the word, and the word is true that he's preaching, but he might have sin in his life because he's an imperfect. The messengers are imperfect. The message is perfect. If you're preaching from the Bible, you're preaching the perfect message, but you yourself are imperfect. We are flawed, but the word of God is not flawed. It is perfect. And so we never follow people. We can admire people, and I've had to learn not to admire someone too much, not to place someone on a pedestal, because they will fall off. God is the only being in the universe who deserves to be on a pedestal, because he is perfect, and he paid the ultimate price to save us. He deserves, nothing that I have is worth anything apart from what God has given me. The only reason I know any of you, the only reason I met you, Jeremiah, in November of 21 is because God blessed me with your friendship. That I didn't, I didn't, nothing that I have is from myself. It's all from God.
Okay. So to rehash the question, though,
Mm-hmm.
what question can we ask to start the rabbit trail of who is God? Because if we start
right,
with...
Here, I got something for this. Okay, so can you remember the day before you were born?
No, I don't have it in memory.
Right, you can't remember the day of your birth.
I don't remember that either.
Okay, so as far as you know, being unalive, like before you were born, is the same as being dead, just not having a body, right?
Well, in my personal belief, being dead is very much so different from being born. Like, as far as, pretty much not existing to existing to the afterlife, I'd say the afterlife is still existing.
So when you're saying how can we know, Are you saying without the Bible, or like how can we look at nature? How can we look at around us and deduce the nature of God? Or are you saying with the benefit of Scripture?
Dustin, are you asking from like a secular view? How would I know what death brings?
Well, no, not how you know what death brings. It's the fact that you don't remember being dead.
No, I don't remember
So,
being dead.
well, and that's kind of the thing. So I know what I'm trying to say, but it's kind of hard to say it. Give me a minute. Let me think if I can think of the words, because I had it formulated and then like it kind of I just lost the question. Just give me a minute.
I
Welcome,
will
Darth.
give overcomplicating things. Sorry.
Welcome to the discussion, Darth.
Hey,
So the question is,
is it me
how
or is
do
it
you?
Dustin cutting off in and out?
Well, you weren't in here before, so I don't think it was you.
Okay, it could be just my end.
Parts of the conversation, Dustin has been a little in and out, but it hasn't been too bad recently.
Okay, so the question is, knowing God exists, some kind of being that creates the universe, who is he? And how do you get to that conclusion without taking any preconceived notions, such as the Bible? How do you find out that the Bible is true without using the Bible to get to the Bible, if that makes sense? How do you start from a completely non-biased place and find any form of religion?
You know, the Muslims had something. They had a word for this. It's called Sufism. It's basically it's a belief that you can seek the truth of God through like no intermediate. And I think you can. I just don't think you can get to the Christian God.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
then
the
you
same
have a big
thing.
problem with the Christian God, because if you can find God, but it's not the Christian God, well, who is he?
Well, it's a couple of simple questions, and it's like, for example, we all know that God is a mind, and so like what, and we're trying to
Disagree.
see. But you're coming for your like
Well,
pseudo.
how do we know God is a mind? Because the whole point of this discussion is not taking any preconceived notions, just knowing that there's an intelligent designer to the universe. Who is he? I should probably take the word God and replace it with intelligent designer. Knowing there's an intelligent designer, who is this guy?
The reason we know it's a mind, it's because when we look around a world, when we make any sentence, when we form any sentence, when we commit any actions, that's in reference to an order. So we're presupposing an order. And an order only comes from a mind. So randomness cannot get you an order. Only a mind can get you order. And that's why we know it's a mind.
Okay,
Not
fair
a
enough.
compelling argument.
I mean, all the atheists have is called the butterfly effect. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of the butterfly effect. I haven't heard it applied to atheists.
It's the butterfly effect and in quote unquote chaos theory are basically the same thing. It's basically saying a butterfly flaps its wings and it'll cause a hurricane. And the reason atheists say this is because they want to say, well, a photon molecule from the sun strikes a chemical upon the water and creates life. They basically, it's a rabbit. This is really what they're trying to say, but they're not trying to say it because it sounds silly once you say it. You might as well take a fart and create a hurricane yourself, and it sounds silly. But they try to cover it with this veneer of fancy words like butterfly effect, chaos theory. But they're just saying randomness did it.
Or the universe could just be orderly.
Well, you have to explain the order.
No, I don't. It could just be the nature of the universe, like logic is part of the universe. Christians don't think that God the laws of logic come from God. They think that they are, I don't know. It depends on the Christian you're talking to. My point is, most of us read the laws of logic describe reality. They're not part of reality.
That's the thing, like, because like nobody's gonna say one of these laws is independent, like the what is the ultimate and fundamental, because we have all sorts of laws, so you can't point to like one single law and say this law commands all the other laws.
Why do I need to?
Because you still need that ultimate and fundamental.
Why?
Because then if you don't have one ultimate, that one thing that's ultimate and fundamental, then you pretty much go back to incoherency. So if I say that this God is the ultimate and fundamental, and then I also say this. Go ahead.
Garth, I'm sorry to tell you, man, that you're basing your arguments on right now are changing today.
Or what?
He's not talking about like fundamental constants. He's talking about he's just using Van Til and Darth Dawkins' boring argument. Is not correct. And I'm gonna rabbit trail you until you realize it's not correct. But I don't think I can.
It is true. Because like you're gonna have to.
Why does there have to be a mind? Why does it have to be fundamental?
Because well, first of all, if you have more than two ultimates, then you lose all causality.
Why?
Because then you have no you don't have causality. Because like, how are you gonna do any causality with one without having one single causality?
You are saying that, but you're not like providing any argument or any formula why I need a single ultimate to have causality.
Okay, let's say my dog is the ultimate, but you also say your cat is the ultimate. Well, then we have no reference point.
Why do we need a reference point?
Because that's the whole point of causality.
No causality is one effect proceeding from another.
There's the thing. If you have multiple, then you'll have no coherency.
You're saying that, but you're not making an argument for it, so I disagree.
This is the point. If you're gonna have like two ultimates, let's say we do have two, you're not gonna be able to ground anything.
I disagree. You could have zero ultimates and still ground things.
No, okay.
A could be ground in B with never knowing C.
Okay, look, it's like trying to say you can have your. It's like trying to say you can have your bean burrito before beans existed.
No, what it really is doing is it's confusing and purposely confusing ontology and epistemology. And I hate this argument.
You're losing order. So you can't have your bean burrito prior to beans being grown.
You do not need to know the ontology of a thing to know the epistemology of a thing, and
no,
you cannot force.
You lose all order
that on someone. No, you don't. You keep stating it over and over again, but you have not given an argument for it, Darth.
That's the
argument. You can't.
I am. You can't have.
Okay, let's read it.
Oh, Grayson, relax, buddy. You made your point. Stop. He's dead on the street.
Okay, so
I'll keep shooting.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's a thing about order.
I would say it's very likely, okay, that this being, if you will, this creator, this intelligent designer, would have some kind of mind, for lack of a better word. Now, maybe its mind is very drastically different from ours, and I understand that certain people may not be coming from the same approach, but we're saying, assuming God is real. Because, again, I made a video on this that will challenge that already to its fullest. And we're not watching it here, and obviously. And I doubt any of you have seen it. Maybe Ryan has. But
when did you make it?
It's been a while. I made it back when I was working at Dinosaur Adventureland.
Oh, I would have seen it then.
Okay. So, moving on from the question, is there a God? We know there's some kind of intelligent designer. Intelligence does come from some understanding of a mind. So it would make sense to say, well, God has a mind of some kind. Maybe it's nothing like ours, but he has one.
This is the thing. Minds aren't physical things. It's not something you have. It's not something you possess. It's what you are.
Mm-hmm. Dustin has a mind.
It's in a sense a being. It's another word for being.
No. No.
Let's
Okay.
everyone welcome Awake to this
What?
panel. Awake is here. Hi,
Awake, not
Awake.
woke.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, how are you, darling?
I'm doing good. How's everyone doing?
I'm doing well.
Good, good.
Okay, Dustin, I'll let you get back to your point.
Okay, look. Your mind is a representation, right? Like, your mind is a cognitive result of multiple different processes of the brain processing at the same time. Okay? Your memory affects the personality, your mood affects your personality, and your personality is in direct correlation with your mind. Right? So when you're talking about the mind, you're talking about the sum, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? But we can't account for that extra portion. We do know where certain portions of the brain affect the particular course of mankind's habits and day-to-day functioning. But what we don't know is where the central processing quote-unquote unit is, because we haven't been able to find it. So when you say the mind is not a physical thing, you are correct in a sense. But then there's the other sense where there are components of the brain that affect components of the mind.
Yeah. What the mind, the brain is basically a radio, and so what's happening, how you get your consciousness, you're basically interpolating the signal from the spirits. And so what happens with people with Down syndrome? Yes, they're channeling the spirit, but it's a, like, let's say you have a broken radio, you're gonna get a staticky signal. You'll still get a signal, but it'll be a jarbled mess.
Darth, if I only have bits of a song, do I have the whole song?
No, you know,
It's a yes. No. If the answer's no, right, then the mind is not purely unphysical. There is a component of it that is unphysical. We are receiving signals, right? That's absolutely true. But there's components of it that is absolutely physical. You're gonna have to give a little bit on that argument and re-evaluate those presuppositions, because it's not strictly.
I think what he's talking about is the brain and how the mind and the brain work together, kind of like the radio station and the radio. The radio may be like the mind, but the mind has to use the radio to get its point across. And a broken radio would be like a broken brain. Your mind still tells you what to do. It's then filtered through the brain to become socially acceptable. And if your brain's messed up, your action may not be socially acceptable.
Yeah. So here's what's wrong with that song analogy. The song isn't physical, neither, because the song is a vibration. A vibration.
Dude, if the vibration is not heard, if it's not audible because the radio is not putting it out, I can't hear the whole song. If I don't have the whole song, the whole personality is not displayed.
Wait, here, the song is the spirit.
Darth, can I ask a clarifying question? Because I don't even know what's going on. When you guys say it is not physical, do you mean it is not part of reality, or do you mean it comes from outside of reality? What do you mean by not physical? I don't understand.
By physical, I mean it's not made of like some sort of material or some sort of matter.
You can't feel it per se. You can't take your hand out into the air and feel it.
So it's not like it's not a liquid. It's not a gas. It's not some sort of a plasma or something like that.
But sounds are physical things. I don't understand your argument.
Well, no, sounds are the vibrations of the molecules. So
sounds are not physical things. Sounds are not
vibration. It's a vibration of the physical.
Sounds cause air to move. Sounds cause air to move, which cause the hairs in your ear to vibrate, and you interpret that vibration as a language we have invented.
But it's not physical.
No. What happens is that there's a vibration initiated from the larynx and the vocal cords, right? Or if there's a collision, there's a movement of the air. right? That's what sound is. It's restricted to the oxygen and nitrogen in this atmosphere, because if you go outside of the atmosphere, sound is inert.
Like the moon. Let's say you go in outer space. You're not going to hear me.
Well, just sound can't travel through a vacuum. I agree. However, sound is still part of reality and thus a physical thing.
It's not traveling. So like when I'm speaking right now,
There's no traveling.
Yeah, there's no little particles shooting from my mouth to your ear. It's the vibration of the atmosphere that it's basically like a wave, and it's eventually that wave wiggles your ear parts.
It is physical thing.
Do not ever say that again. I never want to hear that come out of your ear. That was dirty. That was dirty. Ugh.
I don't know how to fucking. I'm trying to make an analogy so they can understand it.
You better go back to reading Van Til, brother. He was better at this than you. You got to read the books. You got to do the argument more. You got to practice.
Van Til is a knockoff of Islam. Like the Muslims came up with it before the Van Til ever did.
Yeah, but he got to. I don't know how I don't remember how Muslims argue, because it's essential that God be triune for the precept argument to work.
Hey, Ryan,
that's wacky nonsense.
Ryan, I want you to do me a favor. While
Yes.
we're trying to ponder questions that would help better aid the mega question of who is God, if you can put down in the chat for anybody who's watching so far what their starting point for trying to figure out who God is, and then maybe in a minute we'll be able to look at some of the comments of where other people might start. Because right now we're getting 6 people's opinion. And I don't know how many people are in the chat, but there might be somebody out there who's been thinking about it.
I see.
Who could be like, well, if I wanted to prove God, I would start with, etc. And remember, the rules are we don't want to take any biases. I explained it in the very beginning. I'll explain it again. If I have a bias, let's say watermelons are blue inside until you cut them open. And
Right.
I would say the moment you cut them open, look at it, it turns red. Okay, well, to prove it, you try to cut open a watermelon to look at the inside. Well, it fits my theory. So you try to inject it with a camera. Well, now you contaminated it. You opened it up technically. Boom. You messed it up. It was blue. Now it's red. It technically applies to, the rules of logic, but that doesn't make it true. What we want to do is we want to just look at the science, look at the physics, and see, does it ever point to the watermelon being blue in the first place? No? Then why are we believing it? So I'm trying to come from this, non-biased opinion on who God is. Taking the idea that we know God to be true, how do you prove who He is?
Well, okay. Let's take for example, a baby is born with absolutely zero chance of surviving in the wilderness. Okay, there had been a baby. How does that baby survive to adulthood without some kind of deity going over it?
Okay, so that's a good place to start. Is some parent, some being has to take care of that baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's how
You're
I
suggesting that God would take care of us just like a parent takes care of a baby.
Yeah.
or bring us into the world at adulthood to where he didn't have to. That seems like a lot less
do you have anything to contribute about how do we know who God is? I guess that's the basic premise of the episode of the evening is how do we know who God is? How did you discover God, Awake? Because I know that you come from a very different background, and God made Himself real to you, Awake.
For me, it was, I won't say exactly what I prayed for. I don't want to put it live. It's a bit too personal, but I prayed for something very specific to happen soon, that when it happened, the only conclusion that I could make was this must have been God.
Right.
And, in my prayer, I was like, please, do this for me, show me that you exist. I'm desperate. I need this. I need to feel safe. and if you do this, I will follow you, and I will bring others to follow you, and I will dedicate my life to spreading the gospel. And when it happened, I couldn't, even though I was still pagan, I was still anti-Christian, I just couldn't deny it. And I just felt his presence like a cloud looming over me for a long time, to where it, because at first, when it first came true, I wasn't immediately like, okay, now I'm Christian, but I knew, I was like, wow, this really is God. And I just had to let go of a lot of things to be able to admit, like, okay, this is God. And the power that I felt, like, not my power, like his power, it made me, I don't know if anyone's ever watched Supernatural, but there's like this episode where they finally meet angels, and I'm pretty sure one of them goes to their knees, but it just kind of reminded me of that, where I just felt so amazed by his power that for the first time ever in my life, I felt like it brought me to my knees. And from there, a lot of other things happened, to where I finally, instead of just acknowledging, oh, okay, well, God obviously must exist, then I had to repent my sins and accept Jesus into my life, and that was a process of 8 months or so.
Let me ask you. Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yes.
When you were in the presence of the angels, do you remember looking down?
I'm not sure what you mean.
You maybe I misheard you. Did you say that angels were sent to your presence?
I felt like, well, I guess it could have possibly been angels, but I felt like it was God. When my prayer had been answered, I felt this presence, almost like a cloud over me, and not like a bad cloud, and not necessarily a super happy cloud either. It just felt like God was hovering over me, saying, "I'm here. I am real. You cannot deny my existence anymore. I gave you what you asked for. Now give me what you promised."
Never mind.
Yeah.
I experienced something as a teenager that I can look back on to at least prove the supernatural. And I'm planning on talking about this. I have an old friend who was there with me when it happened, and we plan on discussing it possibly this Tuesday night when I have my broadcast this week. Because I think that I'm finding with more and more people that God will allow them to experience the supernatural at least once in their life, just so they know that this natural world isn't all that exists. And they can always point back to that and say, well, whenever I have doubts, I can remember that this happened. And in my case, it wasn't just to me, it was to other people as well. Other people experienced it at the same time I did. And I think, awake, that might have been when God made himself real to you. I think he does it with different people in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, before God made himself real to me, being pagan, a lot of what drew me to the paganism, especially as a child, was seeking evidence of, for lack of a better term, the supernatural. So
Right.
I tried communing with the dead a lot. There was all kinds of things. And there were some experiences that I had, and it wasn't until I had experiences with other people that I felt truly confirmed, like, okay, I cannot deny that, I might not know what it is exactly that's out there, but I have to accept that there is something supernatural-esque, because whenever someone else experiences it with you and they can affirm you, it takes away Because like before I had experience with other people, in my head I'm like, but did I really experience that? Maybe I was going crazy, and so when other people experience it with you, and there was one particular experience where I had it with an entire group of people, and we actually caught some stuff on recording, and I was there with the person who was recording. We had chosen the site very last minute, so like I knew, and when we left and went back to the house to listen to the recordings, I was in the car with the guy, and this is old times, and he recorded on like an old Nokia phone, so like I knew without a shadow of a doubt that this was some kind of supernatural thing, and we all witnessed it. And from then on, though I didn't know exactly the answers to all these mysteries, I knew that I couldn't deny that there is something out there.
Right.
I'm gonna move to a different question. So somebody said God is like a parent, and I think that's definitely a great head start. But how do you go about proving that we are like little babies? Because as far as the tangible world's concerned, sure, we're born, then we have to go into adulthood. But once you're an adult, it would appear, at least, as if adults take care of themselves. I mean, you go and farm for food, you go and build your shelter. It would appear as if you take care of yourself. So then to go and say, well, God takes care of us like little kids. I get that he birthed the universe in somehow in fashion, right? We don't know it's the description in the Bible or anything else. How would you go and prove that God continues to be a parent?
You have to look at his judgments and his grace. Okay,
Where
like
can we see
every
his judgment and
deity, there
grace?
is an. Well, hold on a second. Every deity in history, every single one, regardless of the origin or its destination, has shown both wrath and grace, right? So, I mean, you don't have to look at the Bible or you don't have to look at the God of the Bible, but you can look at any other God and you can see the difference. And when you look at those and you can create a baseline for comparison. And eventually you'll come to a line of deduction that will lead you to x equals 0001.
Okay, so where can we start to see God's judgment or decision making as a parent?
You can start with the Egyptian theology. Okay, you can look at the similarities between Egyptian theology and Mayan theology, and there are surprising large number of similarities between the two religions.
But
I think
a lot of religions disagree with each other, don't they? If you just took a compilation of all the religions and shoved them into one, well, then you'd get one that says, God's a woman, and the other one says God's a man, and the others say that God doesn't have a gender. So, like, and then some say there's one God, and some say there are many gods.
What experiment doesn't have noise? If anything, that helps with the overall baseline, okay? Because it gives you an idea of how far the concept has been stretched over how many other minds and what results have come from them.
I'm saying you start to look at preconceived notions, though. Like, we can't say that was God's judgment, per se, as much as that has been something that people may have prefabricated, right?
Well, then eventually what ends up happening is you'll start seeing trends between the religions, right? And once you start seeing those trend lines marking a common thread between them, then you can start crossing them off the list. It's called a reasonable deduction.
So you'd say a popular belief rings true. If
Not a
90%
popular
of the
belief.
religions,
Not
if
a
90%
popular
of the
belief. No, not a popular belief, but one that can be demonstrated over a wide field of space and time.
Okay, so historical science.
More or less, yeah. Anything that has to do with being responsible for what you say.
Okay, so what you do is you look at God's judgment through historical science and see if that rings
Not
true and
just
consistent with itself.
not just historical science. You also have to take man's psyche, because if you look at the Bible, it tells you in there he gives them over to reprobate minds. Now, the thing is that he doesn't give a timeline for when this happens. So it's my belief that he does this throughout history. So, and the other thing is that if you look at some, I believe it's the god of the Egyptian god Ares, the god of war, or no, that was the Roman god. He does that. He'll create great times of confusion to bring about long periods of war.
He also he also does create order in some instances. For example, ultimately he ends up defeating Zeus because he wants Zeus to basically stop messing with the humans.
That's true. Actually, yeah, that is true. He does act as a counterbalance to Zeus. That's true.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I'm lost in this conversation.
I kind of expected that.
Yes, it's off the rails from where I thought we were. Are you? It seems like you're asking, Jeremiah, is it possible without the Bible for someone to logically or reasonably deduce the nature of the Christian God without having the Bible or the presuppositions from the Bible to get there? Is that kind of what you're asking?
No, I would clarify it to be exactly what you said, other than Christian God. Just
any
who
God.
is God? Using natural means, not any scriptural text, not any Quran, Torah, Bible, any of that, to come to the conclusion of who is God.
So there's no.
What is a trustworthy document?
I can't think of of like a particular document that I can point to one document and say this document here, but something when I was pagan and when I was younger I did the whole gods and goddesses thing and kind of stepped away from that and it became more agnostic. But something that really fed my belief that there must be some kind of divine higher power, some creator who created us all, was, now this is a quote that is often attributed to Albert Einstein, but I don't know that he actually said this. I don't think there's any proof that he actually said it, but it's still a good quote. The more I learn about science, the more I believe in God. And it was especially microbiology. When you understand all of the things that are happening inside each and every single one of our cells, and it's all so perfect. So many countless trillions, quadrillions of things have to continue to go right in order for us to keep existing. And after a certain point of learning more and more about science, it became more and more clear to me that there must be some kind of creator that keeps this all going.
Which is what we determined in a previous video of mine. That's not the question of today. But yeah, I mean, you do find out, well, there must be some kind of intelligent designer. If you just look at the universe for a second, you see so much complicated structures. You see so much intelligence running around, and any origin of anything that we know about had a designer. So therefore, you can infer there must have been a designer over intelligent things. That was a different topic for another day, and that is something that can confirm your belief in a God. But how do you go from a God to the God? How do you go from I believe in God to I believe in so and so to be God? So the question is, who is God? Not is there a God?
Okay, I see.
Yeah, and Einstein or whoever it was you said, yeah, he believed in a God. Did he ever name God?
No,
we're trying to name God.
None of them do.
And as far as I'm able to tell, the only actual questions we have to go off of, which I'm going to love to answer over the next week, would be God would have to be more like a parent due to our incapabilities. I would still have to prove our incapabilities, though. When we go from there, you just have to look at historical science and see how does God judge his people? When does he use love? When does he use grace and mercy? And when does he use wrath? Not looking at any biblical text or Torah or Quran or any of these other ones. Just looking at what we know to be historical science, what we know to be people's personal eyewitness accounts. written down. Can you prove that God intervenes?
Well, here's a way you can get to like I'll link a video I think you should watch.
Okay.
It's for Jeremiah.
Okay.
So the
Yeah,
way
the-
basically the way you can get to the name is by through the causality. You start making that target smaller and smaller and smaller. So before you can have science, you must have metaphysics because science is dependent on metaphysics. So science, like or natural science, is an arm of metaphysics, not the other way around. And so ultimately, you're gonna get to the closer to what is more and more fundamental. So order is more fundamental than a burrito. For example, beans are more fundamental than a plate of beans. And the plant that makes the beans is more fundamental, and the earth will be more fundamental because the beans are made out of the elements. So now the elements are more fundamental. This is basically Plato. This is Plato's The Form. I'm not sure if you ever heard of Plato's The Form.
I'm not.
You're missing a key component in your argument, buddy. I forgot my wallet. I'll be right back.
So yes,
You're missing a. You're
oh,
missing. Hold on. You're missing a key component in your argument. You have to cross over from. What was the word you were using?
Fundamental or Platonism?
Yeah, you have to cross over from fundamental to fashionable. Okay, because in order for a concept to become fundamental, right, it has to be fashionable, meaning that you have to be able to use it, right, and it has to be widely able to be used by everybody.
Yeah, for example, like a tree can be cut out, wood can be made into a table or a chair. So we know the tree is more fundamental than the table or the chair because they have to come in order. All these things have to be in order. So you can't just have you can't just have the wooden table before the tree.
Bubbles.
Okay.
Platonic forms would never get you to the Christian God. I don't understand. I
know,
think
I know.
that this is a
Well,
impossible.
we're working there. We're not trying to get to a Christian God. We're just
Yeah,
trying to
I
figure out who God is. And if it happens to lead to the Christian God, then great. If it doesn't, I may have to change my belief.
So yeah, I
focusing
agree.
on the question we're working on right now, though, if, as I said, someone brilliantly stated, okay, when we were born, we're like a baby, right? We know that God kind of birthed the universe somehow. As we grow up, we're still very heavily reliant on God, on our parents. But how would you prove that I, as a 20-year-old adult who holds my own job in my own house and all of this whatnot, how do you prove that I am still reliant on a creator?
Because if you're not, you lose all causality, you lose all order, and you have no, you no longer have that sustaining order for your reality. So, for example, you do not exist outside space and time because there's nothing to hold you as you are.
Okay, so if there was no God, or if God just left, he created and left, I would just Thanos snap out of here, just poof, gone.
Yeah, basically, because the order has to be sustained. It's not something that sustains itself.
Okay.
Well, God
I
not
like
only
that.
yes,
Order
God not
has
only
to be sustained.
created the universe, but he sustains it as well.
Yeah, you clean your room.
See atoms. Yeah, he keeps the atoms together. He binds everything together.
Yep, he keeps
Well, couldn't
everything
that be
functioning
considered a God
inside
of
of
the gaps, though?
ourselves.
I'm sorry. Couldn't that be considered a God of the gaps, though? Because if you go smaller and smaller and smaller, eventually you find out that we have no clue why atoms hold themselves together or why anything holds itself together. It comes down to pure energy. Well, wouldn't that
actually? There's a certain point at which when you
let me finish my question. Wouldn't that just be considered then? We believe in God because we don't have the answer.
Yes.
No, it's like we believe in God because that's the only answer.
Yes. Yeah, we being devil's advocate, Jeremiah, by saying we just believe in God because we don't have the answer. Well,
there's a real issue with that argument, though. Okay, it's that we can disprove God by knowing the answer, that's a misnomer. It's actually called it's completely false. Like how does you knowing how something works mean that somehow your understanding of this disproves a different theory?
Yeah.
Well, I'm not saying it
That's
proves either way. Just my point is
That's
the
what the
fact that
atheists
we
do.
don't know what it is, and the only conclusion we have is because we don't know how it works, it's a God thing. I mean, we've done this before, and then we end up figuring it out. I mean, a lot of atheists will tell you, well, when science catches up to all of this, we end up shrinking God into a smaller and smaller box.
Well,
It
that's
used
the
to
thing.
be,
They're
it
referencing.
used to be that God makes the sun come up every morning. Now we realize, well, we orbit around the sun, and it's just like a clock.
Well, no, it's that they're referencing God. So like the order that sustains the universe, when they reference that order, they're referencing a mind, but they don't want to say that. They just want to say that they'll acknowledge they're referencing order, and this
So
is why Einstein became a theist or believed in God.
Yeah,
Because
what proof of sustaining order do we have? Because if I look at everything, I mean, the laws of thermodynamics say everything's falling apart. Everything's winding
Okay,
down.
well,
It almost
I'm gonna
looks from the
chime.
surface level, if you let me finish, it almost looks like from the surface level that, if anything, God wound up the clock and then left. Just to play devil's advocate here.
Here's the thing.
We find examples of where, like for example, when we synthesize uranium, right, it breaks down. So, like, if you're trying to say that God holds things together at a stable rate, uranium's unstable. So God may not have quite as tight of a grip on those atoms. Like, do you see where my logic's going?
Well, yeah, but the unstableness can be proven if you look at the number of electrons, protons, and neutrons. And that's why it decays, is because of its unstable nature. If I had a building that was about to fall over, I wouldn't say, well, God's not holding this one as well as the other one. I would say, this building has no foundation, it's going to fall over. It's not a God thing, it's a structural thing.
Well,
but you might point at God and question him for putting idiots in charge of building a building.
Well, here's what I think a big flaw you guys are not getting. The ultimate and creator are two different distinctions. For like, God can be an ultimate, but that doesn't mean he has to be the creator. So God can have children, and one of his children can be the creator. And so everything would still be subject to the ultimate God. And this is, if everything starts with God and one of his sons creates the universe, everything will collapse back into the ultimate God. Because it's still
Does
a creation.
anybody besides me smell toast right now? I'm about to have an aneurysm trying to figure out what it is you're talking about. I'm sorry.
That ultimate and creator are two different distinctions. So the ultimate God does not have to be the creator God.
All we've proven, though, is a creator. All we know is that there's some creator of the universe. I cannot say that there is or is not a God above or separate from that. All I know is that there is some creator of the universe. I'm going to label that creator God. We could just use the word creator, or a being who is intelligently minded. We just call him God because that's the label we put on him until we can name him.
No, that's the thing. Creation doesn't reveal the creator. It only reveals the ultimate. You can only reveal the ultimate. You cannot reveal the creator. So let's say the creator was I don't know, the Hindu god. It could still never reveal the Hindu god. It can only reveal the ultimate.
So you'd say ultimate God, not necessarily a creator God, but the ultimate God. And these could theoretically be the same, but they could theoretically be different.
And I think they're different, because if it were the same, you wouldn't see this collapse of the order.
Why would you see a collapse of the order?
Because, like, okay, let's say the ultimate God had a son, which created the universe through order. That order universe must collapse back into the ultimate. So there's no choice here.
Why must it collapse?
Because the creator God is not the ultimate, and so all things that are created must collapse back to the ultimate, including the sun.
I asked why, and you just said because it does. I said, why does it must collapse into the ultimate?
It must collapse to the ultimate because it is not the ultimate.
And how does that make it need to collapse?
Okay, for example, if there's a government authority above you, you will be subject to that authority, right?
Okay.
There's the point. So even your creation must be subject to that authority.
This
Okay.
is my argument with him earlier, Jeremiah. So yes, he may be subject to God, but why would he collapse back into the government?
I think pretty much what he's saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm going to try to paraphrase it. I'm going to try to paraphrase it so you know that I know, or you know that I don't know what you're talking about. So pretty much, if you have the government and I have a piece of property, I can do pretty much whatever I want on that property, but it has to come under law of the government. The government still owns it. It is still within the government. It is still under the country of the government.
Correct. So you're basically the government is just basically lending it to you. You don't really actually own it. You just there's a piece of paper that says you own it, but you don't actually own it. Correct.
Okay. I had one other question that and I'm gonna cut it short because we're running about the 2-hour mark. So I got a bunch of good notes off you guys about how God is a parent and how we kind of rely on him for existence. And I'm gonna go into this kind of collapse of the universe and all that what he said. The other thing I want to ask in our few minutes left is just who here has had a personal experience with God who has made them believe because of that personal experience? I know me personally, I don't have one. I've experienced God since, and it's reaffirmed my faith. But in the beginning, my faith decision was made off of the science I saw. I looked at science and creation, and I inferred there's a God. So how many of you, I guess, would just determine their salvation based off of what they personally felt?
I mean, I had a supernatural experience, and that's why I believe.
Okay. And then Dustin said that he experienced demons, so that would count. And then
God answered my prayer.
Okay. Ryan, was your experience...
I don't think that counts necessarily. It wasn't God I had the experience with. It was but I appreciate you counting me amongst the saints.
It was a supernatural experience that made you believe in God.
But the thing, demons priests of God.
Okay. And then Ryan, did your experience make you believe in God, or did it just reaffirm?
I guess it must have reaffirmed. I already considered at that age. I don't remember the exact age. Maybe my friend can pinpoint the exact date that this happened closer than I can. I believe I was he was a teenager or young adult at the time. I can't remember whether it was before or after graduating high school, but once again, my friend can probably pinpoint. I considered myself a Christian already at that time. So I guess you could say that it reaffirmed,
Okay, and I know Dustin's itching to say something. So, Dustin, did you have something you wanted to say real quick?
I did have something I was going to say, but then I forgot what it was. Never mind.
Well, if you remember, come back to it. Ryan, we had a few.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions? I asked you to keep track of any questions in the group chat.
I didn't see anybody in the chat. We have the Wolf Den there. We have the Servant of the Logos. I guess it's a little late for them to enter the room at this point, but
well, not necessarily enter the room, but just like if they had something they wanted to comment in the chat.
The Servant of the Logos had a question. He said Gnostic, and I don't know what he was referring to when he said it. I don't know who he thought.
I think he was talking about me.
Okay.
Do we have any questions to further explore who God is?
I guess we don't. At least I don't. I think we had. Do you believe we had a productive night, Jeremiah? Do you believe that we covered a lot of ground and maybe caused people who may be in the audience who may be watching this, who may not be believers, causing them to ask questions, to question their beliefs? Yeah, I think.
I would hope that they do, because we're supposed to have an answer to everything. As far as like our belief and why we believe something. And I feel like this is a good one to ask, because a lot of people are like, well, why do you believe in the Christian God? Why is it your God or no God kind of thing?
Right. Right.
And so this is a non-biased attempt to answer that, as non-biased as a human can be. So
like why Jesus? Why not Buddha?
yeah, like or
why not
is
Muhammad?
Jesus the real God? Let's take it from that approach. Even it's not that I'm trying to find Jesus. I'm trying to find God.
Right.
Now, I personally have my own opinion that Jesus is God, but I am willing to embrace the idea that maybe I have a misconceived notion of God. I highly, highly doubt it, but that's what this research is about, is to just be like, let's just fully have an understanding.
I got a question for you, Jeremiah. Is God Jesus?
I would believe so, yes. And I think there's proof for that.
Because some Christians wouldn't say that. They will say Jesus is God, but they won't say God is Jesus.
Well, let me clarify. God is not one, he is three in one. So Jesus is God, God isn't Jesus. If you want to be technical about it, sure, I may have overlooked your question a little. Jesus, the Father, and the Holy Spirit come together to be the collection of God. And God is not one, he is all three.
See, but I find that's revelatory because to me, God is a being. But the way they phrase it in this Trinity sounds like God is merely a government position and not a being.
Well, I made a video on the Trinity. Again, you can watch it on my YouTube channel, Calling All Saints. I do plan to post these videos over time onto the Proverbs Guy channel, particularly starting with the starting with the Is There a God? And then moving to Who is God? And then at that point, I do plan to integrate the Trinity answer that I have into that if we get that far, if we get to the Bible. So I think we will, but I don't want to be like 100% certain because there's always that 0.01% chance.
Yeah, you should definitely watch the two videos I linked. One it's on Sufism, and the other one is titled.
Are they in the comments under this video? Like if I leave and then go to YouTube, can I find them?
I can link them. Another private. I can't post on the public chat. It's in the private.
So okay. I'm just wondering how I'm gonna find them.
It's right here on the private chat on your right side.
Yeah, it's in the private chat. Can you see
type here?
Okay, so you're the Darth guy?
Yeah.
Okay, let me copy these. Or I can just open them different Safari pages.
Yep.
Darth.
He died.
I have a question for you. I always find people's avatars to be intriguing. And so
I'm here.
Can you explain who the
I'm trying to find. I got my phone on the whole.
Who the person is who's holding the gun to someone and saying pray?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a funny story behind this. But
okay.
The reason she's okay. The person is called. She's Emma Thorne. She's like.
Oh, Emma Thorne. I know who she is.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll deny it's Emma Thorne. So wink, wink. It's not Emma Thorne.
It does look like her.
Yeah, and behind her is a little Pepe god. So it's Pepe God. It's a Pepe version of God. And basically the reason she's holding the gun and saying pray, it's taken from the story of how Betty Page, the pinup girl.
I don't know Betty Page.
Okay, yeah, Betty Page was like basically the e-thought of the 1950s. She's a real popular girl, and she eventually became a Christian and became a born again. And at one time during her lifetime, she held her family at gunpoint and forced them to pray. And I thought it was super cool of her. I was like, that's base. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah.
I think everybody has a story behind their avatar. I mean, mine, I know if you haven't heard my testimony, my avatar is a statue of a mail carrier that I've had in my possession for 20 some odd years, since not long after I started my job with them. And I only realized this year that it looks like someone that I work with who happened to be the very person that God used to chasten me and get my attention. back in 2019. So that's how I explain mine.
That's a cool synchronicity.
It is. It is. It freaked me out when I realized that it looks like him, because I think God waited until the right time to let me know that. You know, something told me several months back to take a look at it really close. And when I did, it blew my mind. I said, oh my gosh, this is him. This is him. And so,
Dustin keeps like changing avatars.
yes, he does. He does.
Rex, how did you get your avatar?
There's a reason. There's particular reasons for this. I've got one waiting for Christian if he ever shows his face. No, Christian started this war and then he kind of dipped out on me. Like I've been shooting shots at people and like nobody's been firing back. So I kind of feel like a pirate.
Mine is a quote. You can't read it because it's so tiny, but it says, there is a blessing in your storm. Hang in there. And it's just a quote that.
That's cool. That sounds good.
I find
Sorry,
it-
Jeremiah. I can only see the top row well. And when someone's on the bottom row, on the second row, it's hard for me to see them. They're covered up. So I hope you weren't waiting too long. You're like, let me in. I know. I left Doth.
It's just a second. Yeah, I was watching the whole time. My logo, if you can see it, if I can shut off the camera, there's a huge story behind this.
It's just J. I wonder what it is.
It's the favorite letter in the alphabet. It's the most important, most extreme.
Jesus.
It doesn't stand for Jeremiah. It stands for Jesus because I love him so much, and so.
That's right.
Yeah, huge.
How about you,
backstory
Rex?
behind it.
How'd you get your cat pick?
It's this cool program called Midjourney, and I just kept making pictures and putting them up here until people stopped complaining. No one complained about the cat, so it's just been that for a while.
Hey, I like it. It's a very cute cat.
Thank you.
It is. It is a cute cat. And by the way, this is on the front of my car and someone else's car.
So you have another one? Is that your third one?
Yes, it's my third one. It's also on
Because
the
I'm
front of
thinking
Jeremiah.
it's on your car.
For some reason, yeah, it's on my car and it's on your car. I was waiting for you to say, yeah, my car, but you didn't do it. You just sat there. Somehow I accidentally ordered 3 of those and I don't know how I did that. So I just figured that the third one I would display in my room. You know, it's like, okay, I've got, I'll just put this one on my dresser or something and display it. So.
You want to
So
hear
I'm
something
about ready to
about
leave.
that
It's
quote?
been the 2-hour mark. That's what I kind of want to keep these things at. Does anybody have any closing statements about what we're talking about, or we're good to go?
Shut it down. There
Do you
is
wanna
no gold.
close
It doesn't
Jeremiah?
exist.
I'm sorry, what, Brian?
Did you want to close in prayer?
I
hate to
don't
put
really
you on
pray on
the
my
spot.
channel, not normally. I don't know
Well,
where I've
it's
decided
up to
on that
you.
yet.
Do it. Do it.
It's
Pray.
up to you. It's your show.
Pray.
So I don't want to pressure. I don't want to say that if you were a good Christian, you would. I'm not going to say that.
Hey, look at my avatar. Pray. I
Oh.
demand it.
Now you end this show however you want to end it, Jeremiah.
Yeah, I'm just, for being a very bold person, prayer is one of those things I like to do behind closed doors.
I
So-
understand.
You should memorize the prayer from Talladega Nights and then start ending your thing with that.
I have no clue what you're talking about.
It's a movie from like the 90s with Will Ferrell, and he just says this really
I
silly
don't think
prayer.
I ever saw that. How does the prayer go?
Oh Lord, I watched that movie way too many times. Once upon a time, it was the only movie that I had, and I had no TV, so I watched it like 30 times.
I don't
Oh,
remember
wow.
all the prayer. He thinks he's on fire and he's not, and he starts praying to Jesus, and he's like, "Dear infant, tiny baby Jesus." He just keeps going on and on about how small baby Jesus is, and the prayer it makes no sense.
I'll have to look at that on YouTube.
Anyways, I'm tired. Didn't sleep well. Gotta go. Have things to take care of. So
You don't work tonight, do you?
everybody, you guys can hang out as long as you want. And yes, I do work tonight.
Oh
So-
my goodness!
Down.
You need to get a nap. Get a nap
Put it
in, okay?
down.
Well, I got about 4 hours in today, so I got to get the other 4, and I should be able to make it. So.
All right, buddy. Well, you did a good job tonight. All of y'all did.
Thank you. I think this
Have a
one
good
was
night,
way more
everyone.
successful than the other one.
Yeah, it's good. All right,
Well,
bye,
good night.
everybody. I'm ending now.
Bye.